Seriously, it's an honor for Maree and I to be here today. And if you know nothing about us, you won't be aware that 4.5 years ago, I received the news. I didn't even know what was happening, but that I had stage 4 terminal inoperable cancer and had less than 3 months to live. When you don't know that and you're hit with something like a sledgehammer, what do you do? Where do you turn? What do you go to? Do you just accept it and say, okay, it's over, so there's nothing else to do? Or do you say, God, there must be an answer in you because you're the only one that created this universe? And so it took us on a journey, and we want to share about that journey and just encourage you that God has got an answer for your situation. Stage 4, inoperable terminal cancer that was in the brains, the lungs, the liver, and the adrenal glands. And seriously, worst case of melanoma cancer that the oncologist has ever seen because of the vastness of its spread. But we put together a documentary, which we're going to show right now, just to give you a glimpse into what the last 4.5 years have been like. Let's look at the screen.
I woke up to a call saying that he'd been in an accident.
Immediately, I felt like something's happened to my shoulder. I had hit it on the right-hand side as I saw what I didn't even know was an opening door.
He was in a lot of pain, still lying on the ground. They were preparing him to put him in the ambulance. That was just the first step in a chain of events that we had no idea what was coming for us. Five days after the bike accident, Paul was driving up near where we live, and he called me to say, Maree, I've had an accident. And my first word was, you're joking.
I remember feeling, what the heck is going on? Because I didn't even see it. I didn't see the car.
In the weeks to follow, he was bumping into me. He would go to cross a road and a car would be coming and I had to pull him back. Over the course of the next few weeks, started to do some tests with Paul that they normally do for, I guess, rugby players that have got concussion. Eventually, the specialist told us that it'd be a good idea to get an MRI just to check.
We were just setting up to go out for a fish. Maree rang and said, hey, the specialist needs us to come immediately or get the family together. I think we looked at each other and it was kind of like, this must be serious.
The results we got from the MRI were these 3 tumours that they could see, a 5 centimetre, 3 centimetre, and then a smaller spot in his brain.
I remember looking at Dad. There's only one other time in my life I remember that look where he didn't know what to do. It was the hardest thing, I think, having to watch my dad and my mum's live reaction and then kind of sitting there going, there's nothing you can say.
The next morning, the doctor came beside the bed with his little computer showing us that there were spots all throughout Paul's lungs, liver and adrenal glands. And he said, see all that? He said, that's not good. And basically was saying to us, it's not operable. It's terminal melanoma cancer and we can't do anything about it.
Stage 4, and basically you're going to face the end. All that enveloped me was this darkness, the darkness of the unknown, the darkness of a feeling that I had cancer that was beyond my ability to control. Not only was it the brain tumours, of which, as we've said, 2 of them were extremely large, but then being riddled with the tumours throughout the body, it's kind of like even if we do the brain surgery, the reality is we may not live through this.
I said, Paul, have you said your goodbyes to your family? Make sure there's nothing left unsaid that needs to be said. Even if he survived the surgery, there was a great unknown as to what all that would look like.
I'm not sure you could have a more difficult conversation because really what we're talking about is the end of someone's life, really, and the fact that we have only a small chance of treatment working and making that person well again. So people generally only have that conversation once in their life.
We didn't know whether Paul was going to make it through the operation or if he would be functioning, you know, he's in his mental capacity.
I wanted to get our 3 boys who were all adults and obviously were so impacted by the news and the possibilities that were in front of us. And I said to Maree, I want to get an hour each with them individually. And just as a dad and as a son, that we would communicate, that we would just open our hearts. Even now I get emotional because it was like there were no holes barred. We were facing the reality of death around the corner. May not be able to do life together in the future. And this could be, before the operation, the last time we have here on Earth.
As we drive down the motorway at 5:30 a.m, with not a lot of sleep from the previous few days of the trauma of everything, saying it's going to be okay. And within the tears, me mustering up, you know, the sentiment that, yeah, it is going to be okay.
I just had this incredible peace. I mean, I can only explain it as a heavenly encounter. I just really knew that that peace was in the room with Paul in that operating theatre.
When I came to, obviously, the first thing that I thought about is I'm still here. I can still see. And I had 38 staples because they had to access the back of the brain to get at the tumours. But that feeling of, wow, I've still got life. I've still got things in front of me because nothing was a given. The reality was that my brain had been tampered with, and I made light of it. I said, well, there's only sawdust up there, but the truth was that there was a whole runway in front of us that we hadn't thought about of recovery. I found myself after that first operation just needing some time. And in the moment of sort of the depth of, again, feeling, I don't know where this is going to land, I don't know what the outcomes are fully going to be, I do have this faith, but, you know, are we going to get through? And they're all, I've learned, are real questions that we shouldn't be afraid to ask. But in the middle of that and in the stillness of the moment, all of a sudden I realised, look, there's a rainbow in the sky. God will help us get through what seems impossible. I just felt like my smile came back and I felt my heart was lifted. And again, it was like fuel to the tank, to be honest. It's like, we can get through this, we can keep going.
When we found out that Paul had to go back in for surgery a second time, it was really hard to take, to be honest. We all felt like just a real blow. And so we planned Paul's funeral in the lounge room.
Some of the moments were pretty dark. I just cried out and said, it's enough, you know, it's too hard, it's too much. I would rather die now than just to live in this world unless there's a purpose in this. It brought to me an understanding of why some people say enough.
Sometimes when I'd go home and I allowed myself to cry and to feel my own emotions, but then try and be as strong as I could when I got to the hospital, which wasn't always possible. We would see each other and I'd end up in tears, or I'd see that Paul's in pain or the hardship that he was going through.
You can be against insurmountable odds and seems like the prognosis is it's over. And what Paul de Jong's life is teaching us, it's never over, and you can fight through it.
Fast forward a few days later to getting in and having the surgery and going the next day, and the guy's up bouncing around. He's not in bed. He's literally had another brain surgery, and what took him weeks. I'm like, in 24 hours, And I'm like, Dad, what are you doing? He's like, I feel great.
The day that we went to see our oncologist, after being with them for 2 years, it's been a 2-year journey of the immunotherapy, that appointment we had when he said, the good news is that there is no sign of active cancer in your body or your brain. And I said to him, well, what does that mean? Are you meaning that we can live forward from here? And he said, yep, that's what I mean.
I mean, there's scarring from where the cancer was in my lungs, liver and adrenal glands, but they cannot find any active cancer. They will not medically say you're cancer-free because cancer can return and all that kind of stuff. But the reality is what was absolutely impossible, medically speaking, now stands to be argued as being a miracle.
You've been left with some things that make life a little more challenging, but you're still living through, around them almost, which is great.
I have lost my right-hand vision, not just in one eye, but in both eyes, and that's been challenging on more than one occasion. I think about the one that opened the door, and I didn't see the door, that began this whole process of thinking I had concussion and then finally getting the scanning to discover that I had tumours in the brain. And those tumours would have taken me out within the 3 months. And so she was the angel in disguise.
I've heard Dad say you might see more in the light, but you learn more in the darkness. And I think just the whole journey's taught not just him, but all of us a whole lot more about life.
I think we can defy the odds. I think we can push through and believe that if we're willing to really see the bigger picture and get the help needed and to allow others that have got hope in their hearts into our world, we can stand up and we can find a way through. And even if we don't find the way through we expected, we can believe there's a bigger purpose that can unfold from the journey that we're walking.
Amazing. This has been a journey that Maree and I have walked through together, of course, our whole family and many, many friends. And as you heard, I still have challenges seeing from the right-hand side of both eyes. And so it wasn't that long ago I couldn't read at all. But now, by God's grace, we're getting better and better at that. But we do life together. And I'd encourage anyone, don't allow the obstacles that you currently have stop you from finding a way through. It's not just a flick of the fingers that you get through from where you're at and where you're stuck to getting freedom. And that statement is a very real statement, which was this statement that we may see further in light, but we go deeper in darkness. In other words, we may feel like we can conquer anything when everything's great, but when we find ourselves trapped, where do we go? We either give up and stay the same, or we dig deeper and find a God that's willing to take us on a journey of freedom. And so if you find yourself stuck, we're all human. There are times when we are facing death where it's like, as we just said, it's like it's impossible. But there are seasons in life, and if you're in a dark season, winter's dark. But then spring brings the dawn of a new season called summer, which we all love. Living in Queensland, you live in summer all the time, so it's not quite fair. We're from New Zealand. So what were some of the lessons that we learned? We want to share a few thoughts around in this last season of 4.5 years where we have had many scans and many challenges and many surgeries. What are some of the things we learnt in this last season? I think the first one would be this, is hope is the birthplace of faith. Do you know that the enemy doesn't want you to hope there can be a new day for you? Hope is what precedes faith. Hope brings faith. It's God's way of stepping into the supernatural, and don't get stuck. Don't allow the things around you to hold you where you are. I remember as a young boy reading this verse in the Bible where it says, the people that know their God will be strong and they'll do exploits. What I didn't realize is that exploits have a history. Think about this. We believe God for a miracle, but then the enemy also is awakened to that and tries to take our hope to stop faith being fully formed. I need an amen. So what's the hope level currently in your life? I mean, the first scan showed that there was no possibility that any surgeon could meet it. In fact, the surgeon that looked at it said, we can't do anything. But we decided that we wouldn't give up on that report, but we'd find a surgeon somewhere who would give it a go. And somebody studied the scans and said, who was an older surgeon that had dealt with the brain, he says, I think I'd give it a go. Well, we had no other option. So you're going to give it a go? We'll give it a go. Because we've got no hope. And that was very challenging because he made it very clear it's quite likely you'll die. And if you don't, you'll be severely maimed. But we thought, well, God, you're the final one that has the say. And in your situation, God is the one that has the final say. And of course, hope is attacked. The enemy hates hope because it's the birthplace of faith. We had so many things happen. I think we've got a picture of that scar, and we had so many other things that scan. You can see the size of one. Let's go back one to that big white blob is one of the sizes of the cancer in the brain. It was just impossible. But there were so many other things that happened.
Apart from that, really, we lived in such a crisis mode for probably the first 12 to 18 months because apart from the 2 brain surgeries, we ended up in hospital so many times. We had several ambulance rides to the hospital from our home until they discovered that Paul needed his gallbladder out and he was in excruciating pain. But it was all during COVID, which was another layer of, I don't even want to think about that anymore. But he had a lot of things going on. He had a lump on his face. They said it's probably another tumour. We got that taken off. 3 days later, he's back in hospital getting his gallbladder out. Not long after, he had a major seizure, which we didn't know what was going on. He had no idea who he was or what he was saying. There were some funny moments, but really it was mostly hectic. And he had so many things going on, but it was like we had a fire hydrant in our face from the enemy trying to pull us down. Even our neighbours in the area were saying, man alive, how much more can this guy take? Because it was crazy. But you did. You kept going. He's the hero in the story. He just kept being positive every hospital visit. As he is out in the church foyer, he's up talking to all the people in the bed and encouraging everybody else because we were surrounded by people that were dying all around us every time we were in hospital.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to us as we've talked about it that for about 1.5 to 2 years, we as a church in New Zealand was praying for a breakthrough in the supernatural. We're asking God for something that we needed to see tangible miracles, not just talked about miracles, but tangible miracles. And in the middle of that cry out to God, we get hit with cancer. Not just cancer, but no answer to cancer. And you just got to say, wouldn't it be easy when you are hit with cancer to give up? But when you understand that hope is Satan's primary place of attack. He cannot take faith, but he can attack hope. Faith is actually given to us by God. But hope is what we're going to fight for. And if you're in a situation or there's someone in your family that you go, there is no answer to this, or you might even feel personally, I can never break the cycle I'm in. I'm here to tell you, it depends whether you reach out to God, because he's the light, he's the answer, or you stay on your own in the darkness that you're currently feeling. God gave us some scriptures.
Yeah, one of the things that really sustained our hope along the journey was right at the very beginning. The first night Paul was put in hospital. Actually, when we got the phone call about his tumours, they said, you've got to go straight to the hospital. We didn't have any time to think about it. And we had to drop him off because it was COVID and leave him there on his own overnight. My son and I are crying as we left Paul. He was crying. And they did all these other tests. And when we came back in the morning, he had no cognitive function, very little cognitive function at that stage. When we came back in the morning, we expected Paul to be distraught still, and he was so excited because he said, God spoke to me in the middle of the night. It was 3:10 in the morning. We documented the time. 3:10 in the morning, and God gave him 3 scriptures. And he said, I don't even know what they all mean or where they were, but God spoke to me. And we knew this had to be God because of the condition that his function was in, his mental function. So we read the scriptures. Actually, they became foundational scriptures. I read those scriptures over Paul with my hand on his head for 2 years as he went through the 2-year terminal, the immunotherapy. But just listen to one of them, and this is to do with hope, giving us hope. It says in Psalm 21:1, the king shall have joy in your strength, O Lord, and in your salvation how greatly shall he rejoice. You have given him his heart's desire and have not withheld the request of his lips. Selah, Selah. For you meet him with blessings of goodness. You set a crown of pure gold upon his head. Bearing in mind the tumours in the head. He asked life from you, and you gave it to him. Length of days forever and ever. His glory is great in your salvation. We went on to ask God then for life, so he would see his children's children's children. And I remember one time Reinhard Bonnke once saying, he's an incredible evangelist. He just said, do you know the word of God in your mouth is as powerful as the word of God was in Jesus' mouth? Because it's the word of God. It's not your words. It's not another man's words. It's the word of God. And so that became our sustained hope during the whole ups and downs. Like, not saying that it was always, yes, we're strong, because there were times when there were lots of tears. But we just knew God was in it and he was with us.
And primarily, I am a real believer, having gone through this journey to a deeper level, that hope is my responsibility. Faith is God's responsibility, that hope is mine. And the enemy is going to attack you continually to believe you can't see anything change, to believe that you're better to give up, to believe that, hey, we didn't see a miracle, or we're disappointed by the fact that others didn't see a miracle we were praying for, and we need to address those things and say, God, how does all of that work? But I have to stay hope-filled. By the way, a hope-filled church always responds. I'm just saying that, I'm just having a bit of fun with you. It's kind of like, you got to make a decision. I'm going to smile in the storm. I'm going to say, okay, this is not the end of my story. The chapters are yet to be written about how I found God and what took place as a result of that. So the first real learning that we had was that hope is the birthplace of faith. The second one was this, for me as a Christian, is revelations anchor us in the storm. A lot of people believe something. They say, oh, I believe in God, or I believe this could happen, but has it become a revelation? Because revelation is like an anchor. When you get something that you know that you know that you know, like I know that I know that I know that if my time is up, I'm going to heaven. In fact, I know that I know that I know this world sucks. Are you allowed to say that in this church? I could use some other words, actually, and it's kind of like the best of this world is not the way God intended us to live, because there's an active enemy that's wanting to destroy life from us. But in the middle of it all, we've got to find things that become an anchor. So the challenge for that is that revelations. You've got to get a personal revelation. A lot of people say to me, oh, well, I believe there's a God. I said, that's great, but it's not the end of the story. You need to know him. You've got to experience who he really is. I love boating. So you realize that sometimes if you have trouble with your engine, trouble with your life, you need an anchor on board. And I want to encourage you that don't just believe like kind of, I believe something out there. You've got to know that you know that you know. And in the middle of all of our journey, in fact, we wrote this book, which is the 32-year journey of our life as senior pastors. And there are many challenges over those 32 years that we thought we'd just be honest about and give people a source where they can gain hope again, because what God did and how God moved. And you can get a copy of that if you want to look at that. But it's called But God, and there's a little card in there that shows you, it's got a QR code, you can go to the documentary that you just saw, but it's the full documentary, it's 21 minutes. And it will just encourage you to get up and hope again. Not just allow what isn't happening to stop you. And it's kind of like, yeah, I believe that. No, but you've got to know that.
Yeah.
You've got to fight for that. We came to a place where we knew that whatever took place, God would have it. In fact, I think we've got a picture of that scar. You might have already seen it. But when you're faced with physical evidence, we got through that. We had to do it a second time. You've got to know that God's got the final say.
Yeah.
And there is a purpose in all of that. Maree?
Yeah, a lot of people would ask me along the way, do you believe Paul's going to get healed? And I'd say, well, I'll tell you what I do believe. I believe God's a healer. I believe God's sovereign. And I believe God's good. I can't tell you if he's going to heal him, but I'm going to, every breath I've got, pray and be in the battle. But one of the things that did happen when Paul went for the operation, our son Luke, who's on the video, he drove him to get the operation early in the morning. He had to be at the hospital by 7. And while he was in the hospital, I thought, I've got two choices here. I can either worry or I can worship. Not for what God's going to give me, but just to worship God for who he is. Yeah. And of course I was praying and my heart was wanting Paul to get healed, but I just put the Spotify, my phone over my chest, and just for 6 hours listened to worship music. And when I was in that place, I just felt an incredible peace over my life. And I just knew that God, my heart as a wife was wanting to make sure that Paul had peace when he was going to go into the operating theatre, not knowing whether he would be alive or not. We had said our goodbyes the night before because we were prepared whichever way. You know, it was a win-win situation. If God took him, he'd be happy, jumping up and down in heaven, telling everybody his story. Or, you know, I'm glad it was this end of the story that I get to be with him more. But in that time, I had this encounter, and alluded to it a bit on the documentary, where I was praying and just in worship, and I saw like a dove, which was representing the Holy Spirit, just hovering around the back of Paul's head, guiding the doctors in the surgery. And I just really felt that presence was going to be with Paul. It was like God saying, it's okay, Maree, I've got him. I'm with him. He's not alone in there. I'm with him. And then it went on for ages. And then I looked up and I just looked like the clouds parted and angels were looking down on the operation with excitement that they had when the miracle of the birth of Jesus was about to take place, because that was a supernatural miracle, that same thing, and they were excited to see this miracle. And then I felt this just incredible love, endearing love that the Father had for his Son and for this Son in that moment. And I just thought, okay, you've got him, God. And then all of a sudden, I just felt a whisper that it's done, it's finished. And then I felt like I just saw that dove go back up. And then my son, the next thing, arrives and came upstairs. I was in my room to see if it was all right. And I was so excited to tell him, which I didn't think he expected me to be excited. But it was just amazing. And I just knew from there that there's a purpose in this and we've got to keep looking for God.
2 Timothy 1:7 says, for God has not given us a spirit of fear.
Yeah.
So where does fear come from? A power, which is authority, and a sound mind. A resolute place of security. And in our walk with God, we've got to know what we know. We've got to have an anchor that holds us in the storms and the battles of life, because revelations anchor us in the storm. And when you get that, here we were going for the first surgery, which, as we've said a number of times, they said very clearly, you more than likely won't live through it. Secondly, you'll be severely challenged going forward in life. And I was there about to go into the first surgery. I never knew what brain surgery would look like. And I was in the hospital bed, and there was about 7 people ready for the operation, all dressed up. And I was laying there, and I was thinking, man, this is challenging. And this beautiful Indian nurse walked in, and she walked over to my bed, and I said, hi, and she says, Pastor Paul. She says, I come to your church. And she said, I asked them if I could pray for you, and they said no. So I went higher up. She wasn't just a nurse, she knew what she believed. So she went up higher, and they said, well, if he's asking you, they knew my situation, we'll let you in. So she came over, laid her hands on me, prayed for me, and it was just a reminder, Paul, you got God on your side. Come on, let's give God a hand for that. It's pretty cool. So I want you to think about this, that the first, well, one of the major things we're reminded of is hope is the birthplace of faith. Don't lose your hope. The challenge may be still large, but don't lose your hope. Secondly, revelations anchor us in storms. And then thirdly, this whole concept that God's promises connect with God's purposes. I think we're big on promises sometimes. I got a list of promises. But do we understand that those promises connect with purpose? And we gained that understanding that we couldn't understand naturally why I got terminal cancer and why it was so hard. Still today, why I can't see out of the right-hand side. If you come up to shake my hand on the right-hand side, you'll miss out. Because I don't see it. I think I told this before. I bump into so many people where there's a lot of people around that I'm always saying, sorry about that, I can't see on the right-hand side. And I bumped into somebody going through the airport, and I bumped it, and I said, oh, I'm sorry. And then I saw it was a concrete pillar. So I just wrapped my arms around the pillar and said, sorry anyway, because I think their life must suck a whole lot more than mine, it's kind of. Come on, promise connects with purpose. I had a guy in our church who said, so, I want to ask you a question, you're going to live or die? When they heard I had cancer. Pretty sad state of affairs to ask somebody that question. Well, you're a pastor, you should know everything. I said, well, we don't know. All we know is that God's purposes will come to pass. Come on, maybe you're in a situation where you haven't seen the miracle yet. Just realize that promise connects with purpose. We work from now forward. Our lives, we deal with today, and some of us think about a future. Do you know that God works from eternity past? So it matters more about what happens in the eternal outcome than the present day outcome. When you understand that, you can come to terms with the most horrific things that happen in this life. Unfair things. And you realize that God will connect all the dots. You get that revelation? That's where God meets you. So I was in one of the darkest moments in the hospital. Felt very alone. Couldn't have any visitors. It was one of those times with COVID. And it was just so dark. And I felt kind of very desperate. In fact, darker than I've ever felt. For the first time in my life, I felt like now I understand how people could want to commit suicide. Because life is real. I didn't want to commit suicide, but I understood how people could feel like that, even though I have a strong faith. And I thought, in the middle of that, God, I need to cry out to you. So I want you to hear this 7-second voice recording. I didn't know you could record in the hospital. I didn't realize there was an app on the phone that you could put a voice recording in. But I thought, I've heard about an app. I wonder if I can find it. And of course, I'm not cognitive fully. And I find my phone, and I just open it up, and I find an app that talks about verbal messages, voice messages. So this is what I said in the darkest moment. Have a listen to it.
Committed to God's purpose more than His promise.
Listen to it again.
Committed to God's purpose more than His promise.
Out of the depths of my despair, I just said, God, I'm committed to your purposes even more than your promises. When you get to that level, miracles begin to happen in a way we've never seen before. And I think it takes the darkness for us to learn those kinds of things.
Ecclesiastes 3:9 says this, "What profit has the worker from that in which he labours? I have seen the God-given task with which the sons of men are to be occupied. He has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, he has put eternity in their hearts, except that no one can find out the work that God does from beginning to end."
You might be a super spiritual Christian, but you will never naturally be able to work out what God is doing. Eternity belongs to God. And God sees our life here on earth not as the end product, but he had a plan for our lives that the enemy interrupted, and he brought sickness, he brought despair, he brought bondage, he brought entrapment, so that we would give up and ultimately lose our lives for eternity, rather than finding the God that paid the greatest price for our forgiveness. And that's why we had communion, to celebrate that again. And I want to encourage you today that your situation is not too big for God. It may be too big for you, but be real with it. You know, I find some Christians that have no stability in the storm, and yet they've got the loudest mouths sometimes. Anybody met? Don't point at anyone, but anybody met someone like that? By the way, your level of faith is only seen in the storm. And we don't have to be bad on ourselves. We just got to say, well, then I need to grow my faith. Yeah. And I got to keep reaching forward. Those scriptures that God gave Maree were scriptures gave me that Maree read one of them, but there were 3 of them. They became our lifeblood, as we've just heard, as Maree has read it over us. But I want to encourage you. Come on. This is not a message. This is an impartation. You got to listen to this. Your hope is your birthplace for faith to see the miracle happen. Revelations anchor us in storms. You've got to get down and know what you know. Yeah. You've got to find people of faith around you so you can get a knowledge of what God says, and then I know that God says that. And to understand in the journey of life that promise connects with purpose, God's eternal purpose. God's not a bad God because he didn't do something for someone. People say, well, why can't you see if you're a man of faith? I say, because it's obviously God's purpose that I can't see properly. Maybe I need more humbling, which I think I do.
You need your wife to drive you around. That's why he's doing it. Yeah.
Can you imagine being driven by your wife for 4.5 years?
And I'm still getting driving lessons. Can you imagine that?
Can you imagine what that feels like? Should we have fun about this? Absolutely. Come on. So you're here today, and we're here to believe for miracles to happen in your life. To believe that God understands how tough this life is. And the final thought would be, and we won't spend much time on this, but the 4th thought would be, breakthrough requires resilience. So I took, not that long ago, 90 minutes to read a proverb because things were jumbled. My eyes, my brain wouldn't work. And I could have accepted that that's the end of the story. But I said, no, I can listen to it, which is great, but I'm going to learn to read. And so step by step, I just kept practicing. 90 minutes to read something I used to be able to read in 5. Right now, it takes me about 15 minutes. By God's grace. Let's clap God, because it's like God does his part, but you got to do your part. And today we're going to have an opportunity. The team are going to come and join me if they're not here. And we're going to take a moment just to create an environment for God just to move. I can't create miracles. Somebody came up to me a while back and said, oh, you're the miracle man. I get, hold it. I'm not the miracle man. We know who the miracle worker is. And as we honor Jesus, and that's what worship's about. It's not like, well, we have to be in church and you don't have to do anything, but you choose. One of the big keys in life is you don't stay in God-rich environments. You're not going to have faith. You have to be in these places where God is moving strongly and his presence is genuine. Man, I want to slap some Christians. I want to slap some pastors. I say, just be real. Come on, be real when it's working. Be real when it's successful, but be real when it sucks. Be real when it's like, man, hey, Paul, if you had 15 minutes with me or half an hour with me, man, I couldn't tell you about how bad it is. Okay, look, man, we've all been bad, but that's not what we focus on. I'm walking around, you might say, with actually those handcuffs on, and I've never really admitted it. If you've got handcuffs on, admit it. Somebody came up to me and says, you shouldn't mention the word cancer. You should live by it, you should live. That's going to stop faith. I said, what a load of rubbish. If you got cancer, you got cancer. But we've got a God that's bigger than cancer.